Hey guys, it's Coach McCullers. What we're about to go through is the quadrilateral family tree tonight. First things first is that there is no printed graphic organizer tonight. You're going to need to make your own, okay? But what I want to ask you to do is instead of turning your paper straight up and down like this, I want you to turn it sideways and write your flow chart, your family tree going down in this direction, okay? Give yourself room and spread it out, and I'll try to coach you through it as we go, okay? So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so what are we doing? We're doing the quadrilateral family tree. That's what you should write at the top of your paper. Quadrilaterals, that's polygons with four sides. Quad meaning four. Okay, so the first thing at the top, draw a shape like this and mark it as a quadrilateral. And one thing I want you to remember is that the quadrilaterals, for all quadrilaterals, the angles add up to be 360 degrees. Okay. Because when you draw one diagonal, it creates two triangles, and the two triangles, the angles add up to be 180 apiece, so 180 plus 180 is 360. Okay. Now from the top of the quadrilateral family tree, we have the quadrilateral itself. It's kind of like the grandfather, and everything below it is going to inherit the rules that were applied above it. So everything below the general quadrilateral will have all of its angles adding up to be 360. So don't forget that. Angles add up to be 360. All right, below the quadrilateral, I want you to draw two arrows. Kind of separate the paper in half. One arrow is going to go down this way. One arrow is going to kind of go to the right. Okay. Most of the stuff is going to happen below the quadrilateral, and then of course there is some more family members over to the right. All right. So the next one below the quadrilateral is going to be the parallelograms. Okay. The parallelogram. A parallelogram is a special type of quadrilateral. If you notice, it still has four sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. But what's special, or what defines a parallelogram, is that it is a quadrilateral with two pairs of parallel sides, meaning that the sides will never intersect. If they were extending in both directions, the top and the bottom are parallel here, meaning that they run side by side, and the left and the right sides are also parallel, which means they run together side by side. Okay, it's still a quadrilateral. The angles still add up to be 360, but we have two pairs of parallel sides, which is a special type of quadrilateral called a parallelogram. Okay, I put down four things here to introduce to you what's special about parallelograms. The first thing is that the opposite sides are congruent. So the top is going to be congruent with the bottom, and the left and the right side are going to be congruent because they're opposite sides. The opposite angles are going to be congruent. This angle up here in the top left is going to be congruent with this one down here in the bottom right. The angle in the top right is going to be congruent with the bottom left angle. Okay, and you kind of see they kind of match up, but we're going to prove to ourselves tomorrow why that's true. Okay. And number 3, the consecutive angles are supplementary. Consecutive angles are angles that are right next to each other. So it could be the top two angles, they're right beside each other, so they're supplementary, which means they add up to be 180. It could be these two angles. These two angles are right next to each other, they add up to be 180. Or it could be the bottom angles, or it could be the left side angles. Okay. And then last but not least, the diagonals bisect each other. Remember, bisect means to cut in half. So if I were to draw the diagonals here across and then across, then they cut each other in half, and that's important for later problems. Okay, so parallelograms, special type of quadrilateral with those four distinct qualities. The definition is that you have to have two pairs of parallel sides. All right, under parallelograms, you're going to have two arrows because parallelogram had two kids. Okay, and we're going to talk about each kid right now. Okay, so under the left arrow, under parallelograms, we should write rectangles. Okay, a rectangle is a parallelogram. A rectangle is a quadrilateral, which means a rectangle's angle should add up to be 360, and all of the rules for parallelograms, rectangles have those as well. But what makes a rectangle a rectangle? The definition of a rectangle is that it's a parallelogram with four right angles. Okay, four right angles, four sides, rectangle. Okay, now some kids want to get it mixed up and think that, okay, four right angles, that automatically means it's a square. Not necessarily. Okay, rectangles, the definition is that it has four right angles. Parallelogram with four right angles. Remember that parallelograms are quadrilaterals, so it's all included here. Okay. Rectangle is the grandson of the quadrilateral, if you want to say it. It's the son of the parallelogram. One special thing about rectangles is that the diagonals are congruent, which means if I draw the diagonals here, they're going to be the same measure. One real-world application. When I built my first house, I had a builder come in and we kind of helped put a deck on the back of my house, and it was a rectangular deck. And the one thing he did was to make sure it was square, to check to see if things were running straight. So he used what was called the carpenter's triangle. Basically, he checked the diagonals here, okay, and he didn't really do a triangle. He just did the diagonal, corner to corner, corner to corner. If they were the same, then it was a just rectangle, meaning that everything shored up to be 90 degrees in the corners. So there's a real-world application. If you want to see if something is square, just check the diagonals. Okay. Remember, rectangles are parallelograms, so all of that stuff about opposite sides being congruent and opposite angles being congruent, you see that's true. I mean, the opposite angles are congruent. They're all 90. Okay. All right. Under rectangle, let's go and set it up. Put a big arrow going down and to the right, down and to the right. Okay. All right, the next slide is not going to be the shape in this area. It's actually going to go back up under parallelograms and going to be the right arrow. All right, so this is the right arrow under parallelograms. It is a type of parallelogram that is not a rectangle. Okay, so it's not under the rectangle. It's just a special type of rectangle called a rhombus. Okay, more than one rhombus is a group of rhombi. You can say rhombuses, but that's not as accepted in the math community as rhombi. All right, but what is a rhombi? What is a group of rhombi, or what is a rhombus? A rhombus is a quadrilateral or parallelogram with all of the sides congruent. All of the sides have the same measure. Okay. Notice we didn't say anything about the angles here. Okay. We're just talking about all the sides. All the sides measure the same. It's kind of like a kite, almost. It's a special kind of kite. Kites have the top two sides and the bottom two sides measuring the same. But in this case, we have all four sides the same, which makes a rhombus. All right, two special things for rhombi. The diagonals are going to be perpendicular. That means they're going to cross each other at a 90-degree angle. If I draw this diagonal down this way, and if I draw the diagonal across, they're going to intersect at a right angle. Okay. Also, the diagonals bisect the angles, which means they cut the angles in half. So if I draw the diagonal, it's going to cut this angle in half automatically. Okay. Understand that a rhombus is also a parallelogram, so opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, and it's going to follow the four rules there. The diagonals are going to bisect each other, etc. Okay. And understand that it is still a quadrilateral, so all the angles are still going to add up to be 360. You kind of see now why I set this up as a family tree, because all of the rules for the descendants below the quadrilateral at the top are going to inherit those traits, going to pick up those items. Okay, so everything for a rhombus is going to pick up everything for a parallelogram and a quadrilateral. Everything for all the rules for a rectangle are going to be picked up from the rectangle itself, but also the parallelogram and the quadrilateral. Okay, now, so below rhombus, you're going to draw a big arrow that goes down and to the left. Okay, so the rectangle, below rectangle was a big arrow that went down and to the right, and the rhombus went down and to the left. So it's going to look something like this. Okay, so you have rectangle on the left, you have rhombus on the right, and then you have your arrows going down like so. And what we have here is we have a marriage. We have a relationship between rectangles and rhombi. There's crossover. It's kind of like the rectangle is the daddy, and the rhombus is the mom, and then of course they make the little baby square. Okay, so we have a square, and I understand that if the rectangle and the rhombus are the children of the parallelogram, that this is kind of gross. But in terms of family tree, you see that how the mom and the dad come together to make the little baby. Notice that I chose the rectangle as red and the rhombus as white. Red and white make pink. There you go, trying to relate everything together here. But a square is a rectangle, and a square is also a rhombus. Remember, what makes a rectangle is that it has right angles. A square has right angles. What makes a rhombus is that all the sides are congruent. We all know that all the sides of a square are congruent. So we have a square, a little baby square here at the bottom. Remember that squares are rectangles and rhombi, and all squares are parallelograms, and all squares are quadrilaterals. So a square is very, very descriptive. It's the group that's a part of the most types of, it's the most common, um, it overlaps into the other groups the most. All right. What is, just remember that a square has all the properties of rectangle and rhombi. Okay. No special things because it has everything special.